gunmen have seized at least 2 villages in the eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's near the border with Uganda and Rwanda. Local officials there are blaming fighters from the M23, which is a rebel group that's seized large swathes of territory in 2012 and 2013. The 2 villages are Tshanzu and Runyoni.
UN investigators have accused Rwanda and Uganda, which intervened militarily in Congo during 2 regional wars 2 decades ago, of supporting the M23. The 2 countries deny this. A local activist group reported clashes last night with light and heavy weapons that forced people out of their homes and across the border at Bunagana into Uganda. In Goma, eastern DRC, judicial experts from Rwanda, Burundi and the DRC are meeting to reflect on how to fight serious crimes in the Great Lakes countries and promote the rule of law in sub-Saharan Africa. The east of the DRC is part of the Great Lakes region of Africa, bordered by Uganda, Burundi and Rwanda. 3 provinces in eastern Congo have been the scene of deadly conflicts for decades. The participants in this meeting also condemned the fact that international crimes continue to fuel instability because the alleged perpetrators escape pressure until they are prosecuted.
Well, for more on this story, we're now joined by African Affairs analyst and Channel Africa producer Nixon Katembo. Nixon, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter, for having me once again, and good evening to your viewers at home.
What do we know about this seizure by these rebels?
Well, according to report that I got very early this morning around 8 a.m., some unknown attacker made an incursion on the DRC territory in Tshanzu, as you alluded to in your report. And they attacked 2 villages and managed to kind of run the military post that was there by 10:30 a.m. South African time, which is Central African time. And by this afternoon, the army was still battling to get them out of the area, but the latest report that I've just received about 3 hours ago indicate that the army has regained control of the area.
Have there been any casualties, do you know?
Certainly, so far, the details are still sketchy on what is happening on the ground. But earlier on, of course, given the fact that I know the area too well, I spoke to some of the civil society organizations there who are saying that there have been casualties on the civilian populations, and several others have run into Uganda, possibly others into Rwanda, but they could not quantify how many people might have been caught in the crossfire, or even talk about a number of deaths.
For the army to take so long to try and contain the situation, this means that this group are quite sizable.
Well, you would recall that this is the base where the rebel of the M23 installed themselves to launch the attack on the provincial capital Goma, including the surrounding towns of Rutshuru and places like Kiwanja, the town of Bunagana. So it's a very strategic location for any rebel group, especially that it is on the hills, and anyone who take that position can actually deal with any army or conventional war that is brought to the hills there. So given the fact that the M23 made it a military base, and when they were dislodged around in November 2013, they left and they went into neighboring Uganda. Up to date, there has not been a proper accountability to how many M23 rebels have returned to the DRC or integrated through the peace deal that were made by the government, and how many are still in Uganda. And based on the information that I have collected over the years on the wars in the Great Lakes region, it seems to me that these are remnants of the M23, and in fact it has been confirmed by civil society organizations in the region. But of course, the way in which they operate with the tacit consent with the neighboring countries of the DRC is still a puzzling point at this juncture when the DRC is trying to look for peace in the region.
What do we know about this Mouvement 23, March 23 movement? Are we convinced that it is them that are doing this attacking in this area?
Of course, Peter, there's no other way in telling the story of the DRC without telling the story of the instabilities that have been being hatched in Uganda and Rwanda, and the subsequent defeats of those rebels. Every time they are defeated, they run into Uganda or Rwanda. And you'd recall that the M23 was a movement that was issued from the CNDP of Laurent Nkunda, who was battling the Kabila government in 2009. And once he negotiated with the Kabila government, the M23, when it was born, they accused the Kabila government of renegating on those deals that they made with Laurent Nkunda. And this has been the modus of operandi. In other words, one rebellion gets born out of another rebellion after discussions with the DRC government. And not only that, you look at also the geostrategic position of the Eastern DRC vis-à-vis its natural resources, but also the cost-benefit analysis of the war in terms of who gained what in the region, especially with Rwanda and Uganda in the mix. But also another dynamics that is happening in the region currently, as I speak to you at this moment, is the supremacy battle between Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. You'd recall that they have been running a cold diplomatic war between the two countries. And it seems to me that the DRC now has become the battlefield where they wage this Cold War in starting different faction or rebel militia within Eastern DRC to gain control of the region.
So you're suggesting there's definitely some political play in what motivates these rebels, but I guess for some it's just minerals and money.
Of course, Peter, when you wage a war, and any conventional war requires ammunition, and I think ammunition in itself is a very expensive venture to go into. One bullet alone is cost about $2.5, which would be around 30 to 40 rand, South African rands. So if you are going to go into a war, a magazine of AK-47 carries about 18 to 24 bullets. And when you open fire, you would likely to spend about 10 to 15 magazines if your enemy is not a target that you see. So that is money. the war is costly. I'm giving this example for you to understand the dynamics of what they evolved to prepare war. And to me, it cannot be just a ragtag group of rebels just venturing into attacking a national army such as the DRC just for the sake of doing it. It has to be well prepared. It has to be having certain objectives, and in this case of the M23, to be able to destabilize the DRC, let it in a perpetual state of war, never had peace, so that the economic benefit of the war run to the best interest of those who are supporting them.
And perhaps finally, what are the authorities saying in their fight against these rebels? And they're really spread out over a wide area and different groups. Is this a war that they can win?
Yeah, it's a war that the DRC government can win only and only, and I have been repeating this over the time, Peter, that you have to have a complete restructuring of the Congolese National Army, build a Republican Army that is responsible to safeguarding the national sovereignty and the territorial integrity of that country. At the moment, the DRC Army is a conglomerate of former rebel leaders. And any attempt to try to restructure the army have been met with resistance. For instance, if you take soldiers who have been in eastern DRC and change them, take them to the west of the DRC, there is always resistance among commanders within the Congolese army because they know exactly what they are up to. If you look at, for instance, in Osaka, he's who led the 34th Battalion Division in the North Kivu province. He's from the M23. And there are reports and credible evidence that suggests that he has been facilitating some of these rebel movement within the area in cahoots with the Rwandan government because he was part of the James Kabare's inner circle as a former bodyguard to the former Defense Minister of Rwanda, who is now currently the advisor to President Paul Kagame on security issues. So it's complex. So when you have an army like that some of its officers are not loyal to the national cause, then you are likely to have a military that is not going to respond adequately to any national threat the way we have seen it in the DRC. On the other hand, you have a corruption within the army also playing a part in a way that they see it as an opportunity to benefit through the war support that is provided for by the government. And those are key questions that the DRC have to deal with. On the other hand, the part that can be played by regional government in making sure that the DRC peace is allowed to thrive and the population breathe some sense of relief. Under current condition, you see that there is a slow genocide that is happening in eastern DRC. Mostly the Nande population within the Beni region who are being massacred every day. And there is no response whatsoever from the Congolese state, neither in the international community, saying that, hang on, why is it a particular ethnic group within the region is being targeted by the killings, or even the cars, businesses being banned. They let it say that the ADF, but any other rebel group always have to have a claim on a territorial space. They have to have an objective of which they are fighting for. No one whatsoever in those killings or in whatever war is happening in the DRC, in the killing of civilians, there is no reason whatsoever that is adverse on why those people are being killed. And this is the war quagmire that is happening in the DRC. And we have to quite name it frankly that this is a genocide because there are certain ethnic group and a group of people that are being targeted within the region. And the one is most perturbing situations where the displacement of the population in the Dutch area, when they get displaced, other occupants come and occupy their lands and even appropriate their harvest. Then one wonder, why is the state so quiet about this? Why is the United Nations so quiet about what is happening in the DRC? And I'm saying this because this is not the first time such a kind of a slow genocide happening in the Great Lakes region and in East Africa. I would recall a prototype of such a mass killings of innocent civilians, but not said as a genocide, happened in Luero, in Uganda. It happened in northern Uganda, where the people of northern Uganda was impoverished and their economic activity raised to the ground. And the same kind of a prototype of a slow genocide approach that triggered the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. And that same method is being used to exterminate the people of Eastern DRC, particularly the Nandi population in the Beni region and in the Irumu and the Ituri province.
All right, my dear brother, we're going to have to leave it there. As always, your insights greatly appreciated. Nixon Katembo, comme toujours, merci pour votre temps. À bientôt.
Merci beaucoup, Peter, and thanks for your viewers.